Our primary mission here at Alternate Media is to bridge the gap between Judaism and Christianity as it's existed for far too long. Yeshua, as we know, never intended to start a new religion. He was a religious Jew.
I think that's a certain point in every believer's life where we think, isn't there more?
There has definitely been a need within the church. That's something that a lot of Christians are searching for. A lot of Christians know that there is something missing in their faith. What indeed is intended to fill that is Judaic roots of the faith.
The New Testament is very clear about bridging the gap between Jew and Gentile, and we're just returning that mission back to the modern day. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of, I guess new to Torah. And we're going to be talking about how to use the ever so daunting, massive looking prayer siddur that a lot of people, I'm sure, have seen and are rather intimidated by the whole thing. But trust me when I say it's far easier than you think. The book is just written in such a way that it sort of already expects you to understand what's going on. But unless you grew up Jewish, you probably don't know what's going on. So we're here to help guide you so that you know exactly what to expect, how to use a prayer book, particularly in an individual basis for your at-home personal prayers. What are the things that are actually you're supposed to do? What can you skip and things like that? But without any further ado, to help me tackle this subject this afternoon, I have my compatriot, Brad. Sir, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I hope you brought a good whiskey.
Oh yeah, well, the Bourbon Rabbi. I mean,
of course,
that's our favorite here at Alternate Media.
Fair.
It's funny, we were talking about that. Me and a couple of our followers were talking about that. I forget if it was on Discord or on Facebook, but somehow the Boilermaker got mentioned. And so we were talking about that. I'm like, yeah, that's what I do every episode. So yeah, that is one of the oldest mixed drink cocktails known to mankind, and it's a shot of whiskey and a cold beer. So I've got the Sam Adams Summer Ale, and my Bourbon Rabbi, and that is my Boilermaker for this evening.
Love a good Boilermaker. Well, it's weird that we call that a mixed drink because
it's not a mixed drink.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's weird.
I'm a little close there.
Yeah, you're fine. But I am, again, having my favorite Bushmills 12-year. Come on, contrast. There we go. Whatever. Single malt Irish Bushmills 12. Love this whiskey. I don't know. It's just, it goes down so smooth. It's the best. So, but I'm going to pour my glass, tradition aside. That was weird. You got a prayer book in hand, right, sir?
Oh, yes. Actually, so I've got a couple because I figured it would be useful to have kind of the multiple examples that people may experience on hand. Hang on here. Let me find something not to lose my pages so that I can actually show the example here. So the one that a lot of people are already using and familiar with is going to be, the Art Scroll Complete Siddur. Looks like this. There is a woman's version. The woman's version you can get also in white and a few other colors, I believe. And they also came out with a weekday, just a regular daily Siddur. And that one, this is the Schottenstein edition that they sell in the interlinear fashion. So, very similar to the Schottenstein edition of the Chumash, where the Hebrew and English follow one another. And this is just for weekdays. This is not going to be for holidays or Shabbat.
Right. I have, so that first one you showed is a complete Art Scroll Siddur, both weekday and Shabbos and holidays. So this is the new updated, and I say new, it's actually, you can kind of, actually the light makes it look like it's really new. It's actually really faded on the spine here from when I hold it. The gold flaking is starting to, you actually can see that the gold flaking is starting to wear out. from because I hold it right here as I open it, but and so it's just, but it's new. This is like their newest Wasserman edition, updated, complete Art Scroll Siddur. This is an Ashkenaz. Yeah, it's Ashkenaz. They do not have this available in the Sephard, or the Sephardi, but I do have. In fact, go ahead and pull this one out. This is the Sephardic complete Art Scroll Sephardic Siddur. Now this one is an Edut Hamizrahi. Yes, this is a Mizrahi, like classical Sephardi, Eastern, like Iraq and in Israel tradition, more or less, pretty new, more or less the same though. There's not a whole lot of difference between the two of them. You kind of have to know what you're looking for. But if you have a preference, if you have a cultural preference, those are usually your two options, Ashkenaz or Sephardi. You have actually an Ashkenazi one that's called Sfard.
Right. Explain the difference there. That's important.
Yeah. So the biggest difference really between those two, it's still an Ashkenazi Siddur, but it incorporates a lot of Sephardic mystical tradition, culture. Rather, not culture, tradition is really the word. And so it's not a Sephardic Siddur, but it has a lot of Sephardic overlap. Like their Kaddish, like their mourner's Kaddish is written in the Sephardi way. And there's a few other things, the way that they close out the Amida and stuff like that. It's all done in the Sephardi way because of the mystical significance. And so, but it's very much an Ashkenazi Siddur still, but mostly the Hasidic movement uses the Sephard Siddurim, the prayer book. So, but anyway, once you've picked out your prayer Siddur, most of the we get this question a lot. That's the thing is, we often, once people get their Siddur, they get it in hand and they're like, okay, now what? Because they open it up and it's daunting, right? You know, for one, this is the full size of it. It's the size of the Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. And you're expected to use this every single day and read through basically the whole thing every day, especially when you crack it open. You're like, yeah, like most of it, all the way up to like here. And then the last bits of it is holidays. So it just seems a little daunting. But yeah, it honestly is not that bad. And we're gonna kind of walk you through it here on sort of how to use this, what to expect, and get rid of the sort of intimidation that is the big prayer book. They're very easy to use. You just sort of have to kind of know what's coming, what to do. So before we go into answering the question directly right away, excuse me, welcome everybody who is watching. And quick announcements. Please hit the like button, believe in the subscribe button. If you want to support the ministry, all the links are in the description down below to our Patreon. Also, we have a Discord. We have special Discord access to the Patreon members, to include an after partes, which is post show in the Discord. We also have a website that you can also sign up for membership there as well. All the same perks, exclusive content, early access, all that other good stuff like that. And you help support the ministry, which we really appreciate. The easiest way that you can help support us, and the way that costs you nothing, is to hit the like button and believe in the subscribe button. And honestly, that helps us out a lot. I would say in a lot of ways. So thank you very much to all of our Patreon supporters and all of our subscribers. We're at 1,400 today. So
nice.
Cool. Right. Got a question? Ask us in the chat. We are monitoring the chat. I got people in here already. Okay. That's out of the way. Let's get started. So basic structure. Okay. In fact, what basic structure. So you have a few key terms that we got to go over. Shacharit, or if you're Ashkenazi, shacharis. Shacharit means well, it's morning. It's the morning prayer session, and that is the longest of them all. In fact, anyone who gets their prayer book, if you look into your Siddur, you'll find that a third of the Siddur is taken up entirely by the morning prayer section. And that's, again, it seems intimidating, seems like a lot. It's really not all that much. There's a lot that you would skip over. Not everything is perfectly relevant and done completely through all the way like that. It depends on whatever the day is. The Chazan will usually decide how to proceed if you're praying in a minyan at a synagogue. But if you're praying alone, we're going to get into the stuff that later on in the episode, we're going to get into the things that you need to focus on for just by yourself. There's a lot of things you can't do in there if you don't have a minyan. It just is what it is. Or it doesn't make sense to do it without a minyan. So, Shacharit is your morning prayer. It can be said anytime you wake up to before around noon. Right? The idea is to say it, though, as early as possible. Most places, like my local synagogue here, has a shacharit at like 6:50, 7:30 a.m. They sometimes have a one that will run a little later, but most people have to go to work in the mornings at 8, so they're trying to get a shacharit out of the way before people need to start getting in their cars and going to work. On Shabbat, obviously, no one's going to work, but they still start at like 8:45 on Shabbat. So give you time to sleep in. But the idea is to wake up and get to doing shacharit as early as possible upon waking.
Yep. I think generally, and correct me if I'm wrong, I remember reading this in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, right? But generally, you wouldn't have eaten anything by this point. At most, I think what is traditionally okay would maybe to drink water or black coffee with nothing added.
I mean, honestly, we would even have coffee with cream in it. It's fine. It's not necessarily an issue. To each their own, but the idea is to not eat anything until after you've said your morning prayers. And so you're like having like a sort of miniature fast, right? And then that's why your first meal of the day is a break fast. And this is true even of the ancient days. In fact, Peter is seen praying, on the roof about midday. And in the ancient days, they waited even longer. They wouldn't have their first meal of the day until after mincha, until after the midday prayer. But today, the idea is to not eat until after you've said shacharit. That is true. But you can have a coffee. We stay overnight at some of one of the locals' houses, and we'd wake up because we'd be up all night, talking Torah, drinking, and whatever. And it was like nobody wanted to go home. It's a long walk, whatever. It's 2 a.m. We'll just sleep here. And so we'd wake up and have a coffee, throw cream in it because that's usually on Shabbat. You're encouraged to eat meat. So in the morning is the only time you're allowed to really have cream in your coffee. So it's like take advantage of it now while you can because at shacharit, you're going to have meat. After shacharit, you're going to have, like cholent or something, and then you can't have cream again in your coffee for another 3 to 6 hours, depending on your tradition. So, not a big deal. But yeah, you can drink a little something. So, shacharit is the morning. Mincha is probably the shortest of all the prayer services. It's like a few pages. And we're going to go over it. All of these prayers have a basic structure, and we're going to go over all of those prayer structures. But basically, weekday mincha is like your bare bones, bare minimum of exactly what to expect for all prayer services, especially if you're praying alone. And then ma'ariv. Ma'ariv is the final, it's the after sundown prayer. It's the evening prayer. If you're Sephardi, you call it Arvit. But if you're Ashkenazi or using an Ashkenazi Siddur, it'll say Ma'ariv, evening prayer. And they all have the same basic outline, more or less, minus the Shacharit with a Okay, so the Shacharit technically has the same basic outline, but when you get to the synagogue, you are doing things that are actually not part of the Shacharit yet. Like you're getting your morning blessings out of the way. You're wrapping to fill in if you wrap to fill in. There's some preliminary things that you are going to do that are not actually part of the Shacharit yet. And then you roll into Shacharit, and then it follows the same basic structure for all these things. So, depending on whether or not you've done some of these prayers at your house, or you get to the Shacharit service, or you don't do them and then you get to the Shacharit service, and that's when you expect to do all those blessings before actually beginning Shacharit service. It's entirely up to the individual. So yeah, there's a lot of it's weird. In fact, that's one of the biggest culture shocks for new people going into a synagogue is how informal everything feels. Where it's very much like join in when you're ready, or if you haven't done this, you can do it with us. If you've already done this, you're just chilling. You're just gonna sit down and wait until your part comes up, and it's a part of the prayers you haven't said yet, and you're gonna pick up from there and go. So people will be often walking around, talking, bumping fists, chatting a little bit, until the irrelevant part comes up for them. Stuff like that. There are also parts of prayers where the chazan is mostly doing all the work, and everyone's just listening. And so you'll see, a little bit of movement, a little bit of talking, and then once the real structure begins, that's when everyone shuts everything out, and then they get into their box, and now it's go time. And that starts. So we'll start with the morning prayers. Everyone wakes up. What do we do when we wake up? Right. This is going
Go to the bathroom.
Yeah. So I mean, the easiest. So actually, I haven't even turned it open to it yet. One thing that I encourage people learning to even speak Hebrew, period, is to memorize the Modeh Ani. The Modeh Ani prayer is the first words that essentially you should say upon waking up. As soon as you wake up, you say it while you're still in bed, while you're still laying down. And yeah, as soon as you become conscious, you wake up. The idea is to say Modeh Ani. So in English, I'm not gonna worry you guys with the Hebrew too much. Pray with your understanding. If you want to pray in Hebrew, I would suggest doing so only if you understand what the Hebrew is actually saying. Like if you understand what the Hebrew is, then use it, because then you are praying with your understanding. But if you're just repeating Modeh Ani Lefanecha, I don't know why I put a mem there. Modeh Ani Lefanecha, that doesn't mean anything to you. You're just repeating the sounds. Then I wouldn't suggest doing it. And of course, if you're learning Hebrew, then you're trying to build that understanding, in which case this is a good place to start. But I gratefully thank you, O living and eternal King, for you have returned my soul within me, and compassion and abundant is with compassion and abundant is your faithfulness. So this is just thanking God that you woke up, essentially. Yeah, and then the next blessing after that is putting on the seat. Now, this is where it gets weird. There's a weird kind of ruling. If you are putting on a talit katan, an undershirt, you don't say a blessing if you know you're going to put on a talit gadol later on. So if you are going to the synagogue where you're going to put a talit gadol on, then you don't say the blessing for the talit katan yet. You would say the blessing for the talit gadol when you go to do that, and that covers for both. But if you are not going to put on a talit gadol, then you would say the blessing for the talit here while you're getting dressed. And then there's the washing hands and the yotzer asher yotzer. So the prayer after using the bathroom and the prayer after washing your hands. So the first thing you should do upon waking up, basically basic structure here. Wake up, Modeh Ani. I thank you, which is actually small little tidbit of information. The way the Modeh Ani. This is why I prefer praying in the Hebrew, because I understand the Hebrew. When you wake up, the sages deemed that it was improper for you to make to basically talk about yourself immediately, right? Like you wake up and you say I, I am grateful, but you're talking about me, right? Like you wake up and you are automatically focused. And so instead of putting ani first in the prayer, ani modeh, they put modeh ani, thankful am I. And so it's you're saying thankful first, and rather than focusing on me. And so the focus is on the thankful, which is why in the English it'll say I gratefully thank you, which gratefully is not really in there, but it's emphasized by putting the modeh first. So modeh ani lifanecha. And so yeah, little things like that. And then you should wash the ritual washing of hands. Notice you'll also notice anywhere in this prayer there's no Adoni, there's no Hashem in the prayer yet. So, and the idea is it's not proper to mention the name of Hashem, even to hint at it with words like Ado and Nai or Adoni. Without first washing your hands. And so you can say, so the Modeh Ani has no mention of God's name. So you work around it. Modeh Ani lifanecha, Melech Chai V'Kayam. Melech, king, Chai V'Kayam. You kind of just dance around Rabba Munatecha. That's my favorite part, honestly. And then you should go and wash your hands, do the ritual washing, which again, now that you've washed your hands, now you can say Adoni. And so you wash your hands in Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, and do your thing. And then you can use the bathroom, relieve yourself, in which you can say the blessing for using the bathroom, Asher Yatzer blessing. That one's kind of long, but I mean, it's a good blessing though. And then you can you obviously you wash your hands after the bathroom, but a hygiene washing your hands with soap and water, not just the ritual washing, which has nothing to do with the hygiene. So yeah, that's like your morning routine though, if that makes sense. This is before we've started the prayer, and it sounds like a lot, like I kind of went over a lot of information. But that's all done very quickly. You wake up, Modeh Ani is a single sentence, you're done. You mosey your way tiredly to the bathroom, do a quick hand washing. And you're saying all these things quietly to yourself. You're not like proclaiming them out loud, standing against a wall, facing east. You're not doing any of that. You're walking around, you're saying these things as you go. Use the bathroom, say the blessing after you're done. You've washed your hands and everything. And then you're getting dressed. You put on your seat. You say the blessing for it. If you're going to put on a Talit Gadol, though, you hold off on that one. Weird rule, but yeah. So if you're not going to go to the synagogue that day, and this is what we actually suggest: practice by yourself. Get used to some of the structure before you kind of walk into a synagogue and you get thrown into it, because it's going to be kind of a big change for you. And it's especially in a Orthodox synagogue, it's 100% done in Hebrew. So if you don't have at least a basic understanding of the structure and a little bit of enough Hebrew to follow along, so you know where you're at, you will be lost. So I would suggest getting used to at least doing the structure. So even if you don't know a word of Hebrew and you drop into an Orthodox synagogue, you know what you're looking for. You see the things and you're like, oh, I think we're in Ashrei. Or we just started the Amidah because everyone got real quiet all of a sudden. Like stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah. So sorry. I feel like
say that, and that just that is something that will happen too for those of you who are learning Hebrew. Is that you will start to remember things even if you're just learning the alphabet and learning the sounds that each of the numerics make, or of the letters numerics. Well, gematria, same difference, but anyway. If you're learning what the letters mean, what they sound like, characters, I guess would be a better term. They are characters, and what all of the nikudot sound like.
Yeah.
if that's all that you're learning, but you've been doing this a while, you've been doing some of the Hebrew prayers for a little while, and you know what certain passages of the Torah say, then when you begin to read, you'll actually start to pick certain things up, and you're like, oh, well, I know what that means, though, because, you know, you're familiar with at least saying it in a day-to-day practice, you know, and you know what it means, even if you didn't know what it means in quite a literal sense. I know that was the experience for me was, you know, so the first word that I picked up on reading Hebrew was asher, right? And I'm like, oh, I know that means that, you know, because, you know, ehyeh, asher, ehyeh, right? So, and I immediately, and go figure, we were reading that Torah portion, and that was the particular phrase that I picked it up in. As I noticed I sounded out the word asher and was like, oh, okay, I know where we're at now. I kind of know what now I can kind of stumble together with what this phrase means. So it definitely will help. I do think that generally speaking, though, in a synagogue setting, they speak very fast, so you got to listen very carefully.
Yeah, that's one thing I want to point out too is it's kind of like a little joke. Like there's the speed of sound, the speed of light, the speed of the guy praying the Shemona Esrei next to you. And it's mostly, you know, because the Shemona Esrei, these things are meant to be a guide. You know, in fact, Michael Knowles really said it best when asked, you know, because he's a Catholic and they do a lot of prayer repeating too. And so he was asked by a Protestant, how do you justify, you know, repetitive prayers? Wasn't that, you know, what didn't Jesus say, you know, meaningless repetition is futile, is dumb, don't do it. To which Michael Knowles' response was, meaningless repetition is bad. But, you know, even Yeshua himself said, knock until the door is answered, right? So meaningless repetition is bad. And a lot of these things are meant to be guides. So you're saying them, but it's meant to like remind you of something else that you should really be focusing on. So yeah, they're flying through it fast because it's muscle memory for them. But in the mind, they're concentrating on what is relevant for that passage, particularly to their lives. You know, in the short verse long, for that particular petition. So, because mostly they're saying it fast because it's muscle memory by that point, but literally it's physically muscle memory, not exactly mental muscle memory.
An irony about the repetition part here is that, you know, most of the people, because it typically will be evangelicals, right, who take an issue with the repetitious nature of liturgical prayer in the high churches, is that their praise and worship, be it old-fashioned or new style, is just as repetitious. So it's like, well, you're just picking your version of repetition, to appeal to Hashem.
You're taking, well, really the difference is you can either take I'm going to use a deck of cards, and you can put the deck of cards in a particular order that makes sense so that they're chiastically structured. Goes from least to greatest back to least again. So there's a build to a climax of prayer, and then it tapers you off to get you ready for the real world. And that's what a prayer siddur does. It is very chiastically structured. Very beautiful. The structure is really well planned. You can do that, or you can take like what Protestants more or less do. They're taking all the same material, but they're taking that deck of cards and they're shuffling it every prayer service. And so they're still repeating all the same stuff, but they're doing it in a different order every time. And that doesn't really necessarily make it different. If anything, it makes it less structured, and it kind of pulls away from that climax to some of what's here and spiritually going. Now, you and I used to do this all the time. We used to work in the band or at church.
Right.
We would specifically structure things in such a way so that when the pastor would begin his prayer, that would be the spiritual climax of the entire thing. So it didn't matter really what he said. So we were still bringing that chiastic structure. We bring everybody up for his prayer, and then we taper everybody down for the message, right? Yeah, so we do it all. The structure's still there. There's just a different application of essentially the same stuff.
Yeah, it's repetition with music behind it, so that makes it okay.
Yeah,
which is interesting because most liturgical prayers would be done in a musical fashion anyway. So
yeah, especially Hebrew prayers. And man, Eitz Chaim, I don't think you've quite yet experienced it. The song Eitz Chaim, when a full house synagogue on. So as soon as you put a Torah scroll away, there's a song that everybody knows. Now, sometimes what's funny is sometimes as you're sitting in synagogue, you have some tone deaf, right? Or everybody knows the song a little bit different, or the timing is a little different. So it's not like in perfect unison, but it's like everyone knows where they're at and what they're supposed to be doing. And some people are quieter because it's a little bit chaotic and they're trying to concentrate on the Chazan who's leading, who's usually the most musical. And so they're just trying to live in the moment. But when it comes to Eitz Chaim, you put the Torah scroll back in the ark, and everybody knows the song. Eitz Chaim. All at once, it's wild, and it's like that's the climax of a prayer service. It's honestly cool because then you got like people in the congregation, they know it so well, they know the harmonies, and everyone's on the same note. So you got people in the middle near the bima singing the harmonies, and you have like this perfect fifths of a
that's
chorus,
awesome.
all in Hebrew, and it's like that's the climax of the prayer service right before you start Musaf, right? So Musaf is, by the way, the repetition of the Amida. You only do that on the Shabbat because the Shabbat is a double portion, essentially. But, yeah, so we're going to focus less, though, for the remainder on, like, synagogue service. Alternate Media is currently in the works of putting together an actual, like, class, an online class that you can take on our website, alternatemedia.com. It's not out yet, but it's in the works, where we actually teach you exactly how to go through a synagogue prayer service in the Orthodox fashion, precisely what to expect, all of the details, ins and outs, so that the idea is hopefully coming out of that class, you can go into a synagogue service. And even though your first time, you might not be able to follow along directly, because it's going to be one of those things where, you won't have that guiding hand of the classroom with you anymore, but you'll at least know what's going on. You can at least, hear everyone starts Ashrei at the same time. You're like, okay, we've done Ashrei, so pretty soon we're going to wrap that up. Someone's going to do a half Kaddish, and then we'll start the Amida, the Shemona Esrei, the standing prayer, like stuff like that. Like, you'll know sort of, at least you can observe and see it in action. And then hopefully the next time you come into the synagogue, you'll actually be able to participate, instead of having to wait like 6 or 7 weeks of practice before you can really participate. Hopefully this class we're trying to help you get to the point where we do all that work up front. So when you get there, you only really need to observe it once and then participate after that. But
we got a
homies.
interesting question here. I know I remember reading about this in Shulchan Aruch also. But what to do about intrusive thoughts during prayer, right? Now, I think the intent of what the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says is essentially, if it causes you to lose your place in prayer, then certainly you have to start over.
Yeah, depending on where you're at, whether or not you'd start completely over or you'd just re-say the blessing in particular.
Right.
It just depends. It depends on where you're at. Now, I imagine what you're talking about is during the Amida, though, because that's the height, like that's the focal point of daily prayer, is the Shemona Esrei, the Amida. By and large, I know in Hasidic circles, they basically say, you obviously do your best, try to push the thought aside, cast it, and restart the blessing. If you need to, restart the entire Shemona Esrei. If it's really bothered you, if it's really upset your rhythm, no harm in there in starting all over. And bowing to the floor. So we'll actually get to the Amida here in a second. So I'm going to star that question, and we'll talk about the bowing and stuff. So the basic overall structure, though, I just mostly laid out: shacharit, mincha in the afternoon, and ma'ariv in the evening. But again, we're going to mostly focus on individual prayer. So you've done your morning routine, oda'ani, netilat yadayim, you've washed your hands, asher yatzer, you've relieved yourself, and then you begin the rest of your day as normal, right? You take your shower if that's what you do in the morning. Get dressed, get ready. You only put a talit on, a talit gadol, for the morning prayer. That's one thing that I kind of want to point out. Just pause, acknowledge the thought, and move on. Oh, that's a good one. So that's actually really good advice. Take that from me and Brad. That's solid,
that is solid, experienced advice there.
Yeah. That particular user there, he gives good advice. That's good advice. So I kind of like, I like the way you worded that too. Acknowledge the thought and move on. Like you just face it. You just deal with it instead of trying to like ignore it. I dig that.
Yes.
I like the facing it and just being like, okay, and then just moving forward. Anyway, so, but for an individual, in the morning, there's a series of blessings that you'll find in your Siddur. Depending on your tradition, what order they're going to be in, if they're there at all. Certain Moroccan traditions have a different setup, Ashkenazi versus Sephardi. But there's a series of certain blessings, ones that, would be most relevant, I think, to people in our audience would be like the blessing for studying Torah. You say it in the morning. That way, if you study at all at any point throughout the day, that blessing is covered for the whole day. So you can open up a Torah, a Chumash, and begin study. You don't have to worry about like saying a blessing before you always open a Chumash kind of thing. That's the idea of putting it in the first of the day. And of course, if you're doing it with a group, with a minyan, and there's a Torah scroll present, and it's like a day in which the Torah scroll would be brought out, then obviously that blessing is needed just to move forward. So, but you're going to find a series of blessings, more or less. I'm going to say those are kind of optional.
I was going to say that's another thing. There are certain prayers that are only said when there is a minyan present.
Yeah. There's various morning blessings. Most of them are going to be optional. I'm going to say optional, especially for our non-Jewish audience. There are some circles in which those blessings should not be recited by a Noachide, and so depending on the community you're with, the tradition that they'd ask you to keep in particular, because one of those blessings is you thank God that He made you a Jew. Right. And so obviously that's not a blessing you would repeat and say if you yourself are neither a convert or born Jewish, you're a Noachide. So it's inappropriate. Right. So it's not that they're gatekeeping. It's obviously that there is some inappropriate things that are just not true about yourself.
It's an ontological problem.
Right. Yeah. And if you're not legally a convert, you shouldn't say the blessing. I'm glad God made me a Jew. You know what I mean? Like, so things like that. The big three, honestly, of all of the things in your prayer siddur that are, especially in the opening, in the beginning, there's three main things that you should really basically focus on, and that's it. Morning, midday, and evening. If you're doing it alone, if you're in a synagogue setting and you have a minyan, you're going to follow what the Chazan is going to lead you into. There's going to be a page turner usually. There's a lot more, there's the Akeda that you would read. The 13 principles are going to be read at some point in the Shemona Esrei or for the Shacharit. But if you're praying by yourself, I would focus on the big three. And those big three are the Ashrei, which is Psalm 145. So it doesn't start out with Psalm 145. If you open up, you'll see that it starts out with this phrase Ashrei Yoshvei, and it's praiseworthy are those who dwell in your house. It's a little blessing of Psalm, I believe, 144, verse 15, and then it's 145 after Tehillah David. Yeah, after Tehillah David, after a psalm of praise by David, then Psalm 145 begins. And that's essentially, you're going to find that in every at the start of every prayer service, alone or in a minyan. Now, in a morning service, after you've said Ashrei, there's going to be the blessings of the Shema, and then the Shema. So we would recommend there's usually 2 blessings before the Shema itself, and a couple blessings after. And throughout all this, if you're alone, don't say the Kaddish, don't do the Chazan's part, the repetitions. Don't do the mourner's Kaddish. Those are for minyan. And we'll cover that in a class again, when to say that, who's going to say those things, what to expect, how to respond. There's a call and response in the Kaddish, but we're not going to worry about that now. So Ashrei, the Shema, especially in the morning and in the evening, with its blessings, with its corresponding blessings. And then everyone's favorite part, the Amidah, or the standing prayer. I'd say this one's my favorite one, because this was the one that reminds me the most of military. Because you stand at attention for this. This is the prayer in which you are like, even in a minyan, in a synagogue setting, you'll see most people will pace, they'll walk around a little bit. It's very relaxed. And then once the Amidah, once there's a half Kaddish during service right before the Amidah begins, and everyone will sort of straighten up, right? And they'll stop moving. And as the Kaddish nears its end, people will take their 3 steps back and then take their 3 steps forward. And then they're at the position of attention, and everyone's in formation. And so then the prayers begin, and it goes completely quiet. It's actually really cool. If you ever get a chance, I highly recommend at least observing an Orthodox prayer service. It is culture shock. It's like very relaxed. Everyone's just kind of chilling. People are pacing. People are talking. They're greeting. They're talking. They're showing each other some stuff or whatever. And then right as closer you get to the Shemona Esrei, people start to file in. And then as soon as the Shemona Esrei starts, it's immediately. Everyone, and it goes completely quiet. You could hear a mouse. It's wild. And it's because you should only pray loud enough that only you yourself can hear. And if anyone else can hear you, you're praying too loud. But you should be able to hear yourself prayer. And that's another important aspect. You need to be able to hear what you're saying to yourself. And that comes with understanding. Pray with your understanding. You should hear yourself pray. And that's not just audibly, that you should be able to understand. You should hear yourself. So if you're praying at home on an individual basis, this is your main event. This is the one that you're going to spend the most time on. Skip the sections for holidays. Don't do Kedusha. So in a synagogue setting, instead of Eta Kadosh, the you are holy, the Chazan, during the repeated portion of the Shemona Esrei, he's going to do this Kedusha at the bottom. Nikadesh is the first starting word of that. You're not going to do that at all on an individual basis. You're going to skip that entirely, even on the first time, even when you're in a minyan. You're not going to do that part at all until the Chazan does his repetition, and then you're going to do that. But praying by yourself, ignore Kedusha. You're not going to do Kedusha at all. You're going to do the Eta Kadosh and continue moving forward. Skip anything. Usually you'll see it in a gray box. If it's not, it'll say if it's on for a holiday or something. If it's not one of those holidays, obviously you can just skip them, keep moving forward. The more you do this, the more you'll realize when those gray boxes become relevant. Let's see. Fast days. The Thanksgiving, Modim. Obviously, you're not going to do a repetition, so you're not going to do the Modim of the rabbis on the side during the Hazan's repetition. Don't need to worry about that. Also, there is a Aaronic blessing shortly after. You're not going to do that. That's for the Hazan, and that's in a gray box. Yeah, and then there's a portion, and at least in every Art Scroll Siddur, you're going to find where it says the individual's recitation of the Shemona Esrei ends here. Easy. So that's that. Essentially, you're done for the Amidah. Now, after that, okay. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. There are portions for bowing, but the bowing is while standing. The Amidah is so called because it is the standing prayer. So when you take those 3 steps back and then 3 steps forward, you're in Ashkenazi tradition, you're going to bend knees and bow when prompted to by the text. It will sort of show you with little bullet points where to do the bending and the bowing. But you're not going to go all the way to the floor. You're not going to go knees down or anything like that. It's very quite, when you see it in real life too, you'll see that very often it's a very quick and short bow. It's not this like really deep. You might see some people do the deep bow during Modim, during the Thanksgiving, Modim Anachnu. So that time, and it's because you hold that bow for longer until you get to Hashem's name, and then you come up. So you Modim Anachnu, and you'll see them bow a little bit deeper, a little bit longer for that portion. But by and large, it's very quick, like down, quick bow, because you need to be straightened up and back at the position of attention by the time you get to Hashem's name. And so it's just 3 quick words: Baruch Atah Hashem. And so, especially if you're speaking at like the pace that I'm speaking now, blessed are you Hashem, then it's blessed are you Hashem. Like it's a quick bow. You're already done. Baruch Atah Hashem. You know, it's not. You need to be upright for Hashem's name. And so, a quick bow is fine enough. And then, of course, there is a portion just as you're ending. There's the Oseh Shalom, he who makes peace. You're gonna have a kind of deep bow and take 3 steps back, at least in the Ashkenazi tradition, and then bow left, bow right, bow center for Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom. Bim Romav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu. I don't want to say the whole thing because I'm not like in a prayer, so I think it's inappropriate to say the full blessing right now. It feels weird. So, but it's He who makes peace in His heights may make peace upon us and upon all Israel. V'imru Amen. And then so you stay step back, and then depending on your tradition, you're going to have the blessing for the temple to be rebuilt, and you're going to remain standing before you take 3 steps forward again, and then you continue. And so that's like a time for you to kind of sit back and reflect a little bit. If you're praying in a minyan, you're waiting for the Chazan to finish his private Amidah before you'll take a step forward. If you some Sephardi traditions, you remain standing that 3 steps back until you get to Kedusha during the Chazan's repetition. But by and large, you remain standing where you were before going back to where you were in place, stepping forward again. And then you have the Aleinu. It is our duty. Aleinu l'shabeach is how it begins. This is there's a bow in here too. Right in the first half. That's 2 paragraphs. The Aleinu is the first paragraph, and the second paragraph starts with Al Kain. Therefore, we put our hope in you. And it goes all the way down to and on that day, Hashem will be one, and His name will be one. V'yom hahu yiyeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad. And then that's basically where it's going to be it for you on an individual basis. That's kind of, you're good there. In fact, I am going to say that, yeah, for an individual, that's where you're good. So quick recap. I know it's a lot, so I'm just going to bring the banners back up again. For an individual praying at home, Ashrei, the Shema and its blessings, the Amidah, Shemona Esrei, and then Aleinu. Morning, afternoon, evening by your onesies. There's small changes. Mostly in the afternoon, you're not going to say the Shema in the mincha. So obviously that's not going to be part of that structure for the afternoon, but for the morning and the evening, there's a sort of a regular Shema and then like a bedtime Shema as well.
Yep.
And then the Ma'ariv Shema is slightly different anyway. Its blessings have a different blessings following, but yeah, that is your basic structure. So all that said, when it comes to praying alone in your house, you're only going to cover about 10 pages worth of material. And that's our main point tonight, is it's not as daunting as it may look looking at the size of this prayer book.
And they're all, frankly, they're beautiful prayers. It's a wonderful way really to start your day on a positive note, first of all. But especially for those with children also. I know a big part of, praying with kids before bed, at least that's something my parents always did with me as a child. And I know a lot of other parents do the same thing. Especially when they're uneasy or frightened, or they feel it's imperative to pray that they don't have nightmares or something like that. The bedtime Shema really is one of the most comforting things to recite before going to bed.
I do love the bedtime Shema. It is, and really Ma'ariv as a whole, because just the way Ma'ariv even opens, is very, it's very reminiscent of a bedtime Shema. There's actually, I just randomly I reopened looking for the Ma'ariv, and I opened up immediately to the bedtime Shema, actually right here.
Nice.
But yeah, like to your point, actually, just so people have an idea, like how the bedtime Shema just opens. Master of the universe, I hereby forgive anyone who angered or antagonized me, who sinned against me, whether against my body, my property, my honor, or anything of mine, whether he did so accidentally, willfully, carelessly, or purposefully, whether through speech, deed, thought, or notion, whether in this transmigration or another transmigration. I forgive every man. May no man be punished because of me. May it be your will, Hashem, my God and the God of my forefathers, that I may sin no more. And whatever sins I have done before you, may you blot them out in your abundant mercies, but not through suffering or difficult illnesses. And then there's actually a portion right at the end that's fair. You'll see a lot. May the expressions of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart find favor before you, my rock and my redeemer. Like that's just a great way to start laying your head down anyway. Like it's just a declaration of I forgive everybody right now, right before I'm going to bed. Tomorrow's a new day.
One thing that came to mind that's worth at least touching on for people who may find themselves in a synagogue experiencing, this real life for the first time is davening.
Yeah.
Right. So explain that. First of all, because a lot of people find it to be an odd practice, naturally, because of the way it looks. And there's all kinds of conspiracy theories out there about what it symbolizes, which is those are some of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. I won't go into detail on them here because they're rather inappropriate. And you figure out, for anybody who's been in this for any amount of time, you figure out very quickly as soon as you go into detail on them exactly how ignorant they are. But be that as it may, for myself, for the questions we had earlier about stray thoughts, actually, I have found that that motion helps for concentration for me. But so explain the reasoning and purpose behind that.
So davening is more of a concept. It's this idea of being in deep in prayer.
Sure.
It's davening is you shutting out the world. Now you'll see most Hasidic circles, davening looks a particular way. The shekeling.
The shuckling. Yep.
Shekeling I think it literally means to shake. And it's when you usually see somebody with a prayer book in hand,
Yeah, they're
Wailing Wall, and they're sort of shaking, right? Like
Yeah.
this tiny little bows. There's actually a lot of literature on what it really means. Nobody actually knows the true origin of shekeling and its true meaning, because everyone you ask, and from when it began, not really sure when, it was always a different answer. My favorite answer is you are a candle, right? You are a light to the world, and so your body's like a candle, and so the when you're in prayer, you flicker like a candle does. I do like that. It's a nice symbolic thing, but for some people, it is tiny bowing, like you're constantly bowing before the king while in prayer. So as you say a blessing, you bow again. You're just kind of bowing, small bows. Some people, it helps them concentrate, because the Amida particularly is when this would be done. The shekeling is usually done during the silent prayer. They are singing the prayer to themselves, and the bowing is actually them maintaining rhythm of the song they're singing, right? And so part of that is just because it's a song to them, and so they're quite literally just staying in rhythm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of everyone does it for different reasons. Some people don't do it at all. It's not a requirement. It's, no one's going to look at you different if you do or don't. Because once you're in the Amida, that's your bubble. That's your private space. The world goes away. It's just you and God now. Yeah, you're in a group, oftentimes with a minion. But it is now, this is you. This is your private moment in time space, to stand at attention before the king in his throne room. So, yeah, what you do in that time, largely, as long as it's respectful, obviously. But yeah, that bowing, everyone has a different reason for it. Was there anything I missed that you sound like you wanted to touch for the davening?
No. You pretty much hit it on the head. I think one of the more common reasons behind it that people may find, especially if you were to look on like Chabad.org or something like that, one of the more common reasons is that, and for those who are students of Tanya will also be familiar with this, is that the body at that point mimics the motion of a flame.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did bring that up slightly, and so I like that. But that's honestly, I do sometimes find myself doing that, and for me, it's because it's rhythm. Because for me, I do the Hebrew rhythmically in song. So for me, I am sort of following the music when I'm doing it. It helps me maintain the rhythm of the prayer. You know what I mean? And if I find that if I sort of sit still, I might miss a word or skip a beat, and it kind of ruins my flow. So that actually helps me to. So that's not my reason, but I do like, it's not something that I think about during my prayers. But I'm aware of it, and it's one of my favorite explanations, because when I'm watching other people pray, that's what I see. But when I'm in my prayer space, I don't see that in me necessarily.
Yeah, and like I said, for me, it's it and maybe that's it too, is that it's rhythmic, and so the fact that it's rhythmic helps or assists in concentration, right? So I don't experience quite the same level of stray thought that I might if I wasn't doing it, and that is a notable difference that I noticed for myself. Now that may be due to some people need to fidget and others don't.
Yeah, in fact, speaking of, there are times, like I said, most people, the place goes dead quiet once the Shemona Esrei begins. That's not entirely true. There is a person in our community here, who cannot sit still, cannot concentrate if he isn't moving. And so for virtually the entire Shemona Esrei, he sits all the way in the back because he knows it'll distract other people. So he goes all the way in the back on the carpeted portion of the synagogue, and he paces back and forth for the entire Shemona Esrei. And it's on carpet, so no one can hear him. It's in the back. He's in no one's line of sight. But that's the way that he has to do it, because he's like severe, like actual OCS. What is it? Not OCS.
Like ADHD or something.
OCD. He has like actual like diagnosed OCD. And so for him, if he's not pacing, he can't. And so the pacing helps for him to actually focus enough to get through the prayers. To each their own, and not a single person in this Orthodox synagogue judges him for it. No one. And he's one of the rabbis that teaches at the school, in fact. So yeah, it's different. It's weird when you're reading it on paper, because especially here, talking about it, it's one of those, like, you kind of have to understand there's a thing on paper that you see, and then when you go to a synagogue, the rules change a little bit. There's a lot, things are different, things that you just can't quite capture on paper. And so we're going to do our best in our class time to prepare you for something like that for your first visit to the synagogue. But, for tonight, we just basically want to cover the big basics, the Ashrei, Shema, the Amida, and the Aleinu. These are the starting points. Walk before you run kind of starting points here. And these won't take you very long either in the morning by yourself. The Ashrei is not long. It's one psalm. The Shema is about, I'd say, half the length of the Amida, and the Amida is actually fairly short. And then the Aleinu is 2 paragraphs, and then you're good for the day. You're that's your morning. Your afternoon, you're not saying the Shema. And in your evening, it's the same basic structure: Ashrei, Shema, Amida, Aleinu, for when you're praying by yourself. Once you get used to that, you'll see that everywhere. Even when you go to a synagogue and observe, you'll see that, yes, there's a lot of stuff around everything, but you'll notice that there's like some blessings, and then there's an Ashrei, and then some more blessings. You're like, oh, so this is like a big Ashrei portion. And you'll notice there's a blessing Shema, and the blessings around that, and then there's some stuff going into the Amida. After the Amida, there's a little bit of fluff going into the Aleinu. Like, it's the same basic overall structure with some added other psalms and materials, because you're part of a minyan now. But it's the same basic structure as around those points. So that's, yeah. So we're at the hour. I think.
Yeah.
And I hope we were able. It looks like Eliezer was actually in the comments helping out somebody here in the chat. So thank you.
Wonderful.
And I hope those of you in the chat or those of you watching, your questions have been answered. If not, even if you're not here live watching it, leave a question in the comments. We'll get around to it. You can also reach out to us on our website at alternatemedia.com, ALTARNATE, alternatemedia.com. And if you feel like supporting the ministry, feel so led to do so, you can go down to any of the links in our description below. We have a Discord with some exclusive access for our supporters, and we also have some exclusive content to our paying supporters. Membership starts out as little as $1 a month, right? So we're not asking for a lot. But we do put a lot of work into some of our, especially our exclusive stuff. We put a lot of time and energy and work into some of those things, and we still want those to be as obtainable as possible, while giving us the ability to make time to continue doing those things. And so a little bit of compensation is, and not much. We hope it's not much anyway, is what we're hoping to continue pushing out some of these quality materials for very little. And we don't discriminate either. We don't have stuff for the higher tiers, like exclusively. Like if you're in the higher tier, you get access to this article that nobody else has. We don't do it that way. If you support, the exclusive articles are yours to read. All right. So a couple of things. Actually, you know what? I just realized we did not pick out a meme of the week.
Oh boy.
Man. What are you thinking? What are you thinking?
Hang on. Let me find a good one.
Dang it.
We had some uploaded. We had some decent ones.
So while he's looking, actually, great question. What about wrapping tefillin? Okay. Do not wrap tefillin, Gentiles. If you are not a convert, not a born Jew, not halakhically Jewish, we ask that you respectfully do not wrap tefillin. Now, there are other ways around this that even the Vilna Gaon, the Gra, actually suggested. As long as you don't fulfill the commandment in that way, then it's fine. So the Gra actually recommended that even just having a rolled up, like a printed Shema in the front of your hat, right, where it would sit, where tefillin would sit, but it's not tefillin, but it is still tefillin like, is a tefillin adjacent. That would be fine, because you're not doing something that is considered to be exclusively assigned for the Jewish people, which is really what it comes down to. That's the idea. And so Jewish communities ask that non-converts, non-Jews, Noachides do not wrap tefillin. That is seen as like the wedding ring for the Jewish people, right? And so if you are not part of the marriage, then you shouldn't be wearing the wedding ring. And so, great question. Really glad you brought that up. So we would suggest, tefillin is a rite of passage. Yeah. So no tefillin, please. We ask that if you are not Jewish, to respect at least that. Many of our Hebrew roots people will have no problem with that because they hate the idea of tefillin anyway. But like I said, the Vilna Gaon, the Gra, we would put a Shema scroll in his hat, so that he would have something like that, or like a Shema bracelet. Things like that. There are ways to still fulfill that commandment, but not in that specific way. And so, that's why we didn't cover tefillin in this episode at all, because most of our listeners are Christian or non-Jews. And so we do not recommend wrapping tefillin.
All right. Our meme of the week. This was from Tea with Kara. So she is the Baal Hamimim again.
She would be,
of course. This was just gold to me. There were a couple of other really good ones, but this one got me.
That was pretty good. Good choice. All right, so Tea with Kara, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You are our Baal Hamimim. Congratulations. We didn't do the meme opener thing, whatever. It's okay.
Do it.
No, it's too late now. That has been our meme of the week. Okay. So I think we're done. I think we're good. If you have any further questions, please leave a comment. If there's anything we didn't cover, we could probably do a part 2 to this episode. But keep in mind, we are putting together an online class for alternatmedia.com to actually go through this as what you need to know for your first time visiting a synagogue. So if you want more information on how to pray in a minyan at a synagogue, that is in the works. We do have that on the way. We can put together a part 2 if there were some unanswered questions that still pertain to individual prayer in the home. We can absolutely, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think, and we can address those in a future video. So anyway, there's
awesome.
Very well. So congratulations. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, we will see you guys in the after parties in the Discord immediately post show. I think that's everything, right? I think we're good now. We good?
Yeah. I mean, so we are working on the course for this, which I'm super stoked about when it will finally drop. Working on a couple of other courses. I know for me, I'm working on an apologetics course right now. So that's also to come, Torah Apologetics, which I will also be discussing with David Wilbur from Pronomium Publishing, also an instructor for 119 Ministries. That's going to be an awesome conversation. We'll be talking about Torah Apologetics, Defending the Sabbath, his new book, Remember the Sabbath, which is a spectacular book for its purpose, right? If it comes to defending the Sabbath, this gets the job done. We've got a couple of things in the chute that are hopefully on the way. Don't know how soon, because developing a course is time consuming.
It is. It is taking a minute, but it's also fulfilling in a lot of ways. Like it's
Indeed.
great for our classes to drop because then it's it'll be good for a lot of people. And so it's these 1 hour live sessions are great. We can sometimes cover a lot of ground depending on the topic, but oftentimes this hour is not enough. And so the classroom material, it gives us a chance to be a lot more thorough for those of you who really want a much more in-depth look at certain subjects. Really happy about getting those in. So,
Yep.
Awesome.
Also putting together another debate. We will be hosting another debate that I will be moderating this time. And it will be, again, about the Trinity, but probably a bit of a different aspect than the Angel of the Lord. So that is going to be sometime in July. We're still yet to establish a date, but sometime in July.
All right, our last teaser, and then we'll roll the credits. So, I got nothing else. If you got nothing else,
I got nothing else. Everybody, if you're a patron supporter, if you're somebody who has access to the After Pardes, please come join us in the After Pardes. With that said, L'chaim.
L'chaim.